You can have your
Main event of the evening.
ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 22, Fonz-How, Inc.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Fonz-How, Inc.
We open in the Cunningham living room, where Howard is making Marion, Richie, and Joni keep their eyes covered.
Can we open our eyes now, Dad?
You gotta keep them closed until Fonzie gets here.
Then Fonzie gets home, and Howard makes him cover his eyes as he sits down. He lets everyone open their eyes and shows them a bag of garbage. He makes Marion carry it over to the table. The bag breaks, much to her annoyance.
It's not funny. Now look at this rug, and I've got to pick it up.
Howard reveals to everyone that his secret ambition has always been to be an inventor. The other day, the same thing that happened to Marion happened to him. And it occurred to Howard that it's the 1950s, and nobody should have to take out the garbage 15 times a week. So to make a long story short, Howard invented a trash compactor, or as he calls it, a garbage gulper. His family makes fun of him, but Fonzie seems to get it, comparing it to when they squeeze together old cars.
You want to squeeze it all together like they do with old cars when they put them to rest.
Exactamundo!
Richie says it's a shame Howard doesn't have some big corporation behind him. Howard doesn't see the point. Every great invention has been by the little guy. Like the Wright brothers inventing the airplane in the bicycle shop. Or, as Joni says, Jenny Piccolo inventing a see-through nightie in her bedroom. Howard asks Marion to have a talk with Joni, and Marion tells her the see-through nightie was invented by a man named Frederick in Hollywood. As Howard shows the blueprints for his invention, Fonzie has some suggestions for how it could be improved, like using a hydraulic lift instead of a spring. Howard admits to not knowing much about hydraulics. He also says he's not very good with his hands, which Marion disagrees with, if you know what I mean.
Know what I mean, nuts, know what I mean, say no more.
Richie suggests Howard work together with Fonzie. Richie knows from experience that Fonzie is great with his hands, too. Because he's a mechanical genius, not for any other reason. Fonzie says he's busy, but Richie manages to convince Fonzie with a golly gee, you'd be great at it.
Well, golly gee, Fonz,
And some additional pressure from Marion and Joni, and Fonzie agrees to do it. Howard, newly energized, takes Fonzie outside to the garage to tinker. The next day at Arnold's, Fonzie and his date Eileen get annoyed at Richie's band for taking a break from playing during rehearsal when they're trying to dance.
There's nobody dancing here. It's not really a dance.
Red, I am dancing.
They start playing again, and Howard comes in with a large boxy device, annoyed at Fonzie for not coming by at 8 like he was supposed to. Fonzie explains Doris came by.
Doris, I'm terribly sorry, but Fonzie is helping me.
Mr. C, this ain't Doris. She had to go to work at 9 o'clock. This is Eileen.
And then Howard excuses Eileen, then sets down the box on a table where two teens are sitting. Al comes out to scold them for interrupting when people are trying to eat. He's also not happy to hear that Howard's invention is a garbage gulper. In the restaurant industry, they try not to use the word garbage. As the two teens leave, Howard and Fonzie sit down at the table. Howard explains that they're demonstrating the machine for investors in 2 days, but the part of the machine that's supposed to move doesn't move. Fonzie is confident he can fix it in time, just not right now, but Howard tries to send Eileen away so he and Fonzie can work on the gulper. Fonzie snaps his fingers and calls Richie into his office, while he has Howard dance with Eileen.
Eileen, dance with him.
I don't want to dance.
In his office, Fonzie complains that Howard is going berserko over his invention. Richie says his father is bothering him too, but Fonzie doesn't have much sympathy for him. Richie's the one who got Fonzie into this mess. He does an impression of Richie convincing him, and it's delightful.
Oh, come on, be an inventor. Oh, golly gee.
The two of them commiserate. Howard wants to start a corporation, and he wants Richie to be the accountant, with a green eye sheet and everything, and he's planning to send Joni to welding school. He's even been meeting girls at the bottom of Fonzie's stairwell and sending them away. Richie adds that Howard wants to call his corporation Fonz-How Incorporated. All of Fonzie's anger instantly evaporates at the prospect of that name in lights, maybe even on a blimp.
It's the blimp!
Fonzie goes back out and fixes the gulper, and he and Howard excitedly talk about the future. They go into the kitchen to try out the gulper on Al's garbage. It doesn't go well.
Let him go, Fonz!
We must really be off. That's the first time people threw food at us.
The next day, early in the morning, Howard and Fonzie call the rest of the Cunninghams down into the living room to see the newly functional gulper. Howard gushes about how this is an historic event, and once they flip that switch, they're going to have whatever they want. Joni asks if she can drop out of welding school. Fonzie flips the switch, and for a moment, it works perfectly, but only a moment. Howard crumples in grief. Joni asks why Fonzie doesn't just fix it by hitting it, like he does all the time. Fonzie says this isn't a simple toy, it's heavy machinery with hydraulics. Howard tells everyone to go back to bed. Fonzie tells Howard they can have it fixed in a minute, but Howard is convinced they're finished. Fonzie says this was a great idea, and Howard can't just quit. What if Edison had quit? Or Marconi? Howard still isn't convinced. Fonzie tells Howard he can let the American housewife down if he wants, but Fonzie is one man who will never let women down. As he fixes the gulper, Howard realizes Fonzie is right and gets up to help him. The day of the presentation, Howard and Fonzie, along with Richie, Marion, Potsy, and Ralph, show the gulper to a group of potential investors. Richie, who is in charge of marketing and accounting, gives an introductory spiel for Marion, a typical American housewife giving her unbiased opinion on garbage. Marion calls garbage a plague on the earth.
I just spend time constantly taking out the garbage.
It's kinda great. They demonstrate the machine, and when it starts working, the investors are so excited they start throwing in as much garbage as possible,
Give me all the garbage, especially the liverwurst. Get the liverwurst in here.
causing it to overload. Fonzie asks if anyone has a broom or a stick, and ends up taking one investor's very expensive cane. He gets the gulper working again, but in the process destroys the cane except for the solid silver tip. The investor shouts for everyone to get out.
You take that out of her, all of you. I don't want to see this now.
Later at Arnold's, everyone meets, and Howard explains they said that America wasn't ready for the garbage gulper.
That's bad.
But they did like the hydraulic system,
That's good.
enough to pay them $300 for it. Howard says he couldn't have done it without Fonzie, and doesn't know how to thank him. Fonzie says Howard could give him the $300, but instead Howard gives him a little hug. Richie, happy to see his father and his best friend getting along, takes a picture of the two of them together with a model blimp with Fonz-How Inc. on the side. Later, Marion finishes a phone call with Joni.
I'll ask him, dear. All right, bye-bye, dear.
She tells Howard that Joni wants to know if she can quit welding school, and Howard admits he got carried away. Howard says he's impressed that Fonzie seems to never get depressed. Fonzie says that's only on the outside. Deep down, he gets depressed, but he has his own way of drowning his sorrows. He gets up, snaps his fingers, and starts dancing with a girl. Howard and Marion soon join him.
Thank you, Peter. That was Fonz-How Inc., which first aired back on March 8th, 1977. That night, Happy Days was the lead into a brand new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls tried to get between Laverne's father, Frank, and his new girlfriend, Veronica.
Well, I used to know a girl and I could have sworn that her name was Veronica.
CBS countered with a new episode of Who's Who, and on NBC there was a new episode of Baa Baa Black Sheep in which Pappy is ordered to retreat after fighting to hold an island. Fonz-How Inc. was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by Joe Glauberg, who had previously written Two Angry Men, Bringing Up Spike, and Fonzie Loves Pinky Part 3. As for guest stars this week, we have Ken Olfsen as Mr. Simpson,
Simpson, eh? How very strange.
the potential investor in the garbage gulper. A character actor from Boston, Ken was a steady presence in film and TV in the 70s and 80s. His movie credits include Spaceballs,
Where's my droid of honor?
Oh dear, yes. Where's Dot? Dot Matrix!
Mr. Mom, and Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. On television, he was seen in 21 Jump Street, Three's Company, Charlie's Angels, Different Strokes, and much, much more. Off-screen, he was a counselor at the Southern California Counseling Center in Los Angeles. So, Peter, what, if anything, did you think of Ken Olfsen as Mr. Simpson?
I did find it very funny when Fonzie destroyed his cane. Other than that, I don't have much to say about him, but I love that he was in Breakin' 2.
Yeah, that was a pretty great credit for him. I saw him as being part of a proud comedic tradition of the humorless stuffed shirt businessman whose job it is to fume at the wacky antics of the heroes in a comedy.
Humor happens to him, not by him.
Exactly. He's there just to be mad and get impatient with Howard and Fonzie and the whole gang kind of clowning around.
And he does it very well.
It's not the most fun job in comedy, but somebody has to do it. We also supposedly have actress Edwina Goff, also known as Edwina Anderson, as a character named Jacqueline, but this story has no characters named Jacqueline that I could see. One IMDb user thinks that Edwina is actually playing Fonzie's girlfriend Eileen, but this character does not resemble Edwina Goff. I think Edwina is playing Mr. Simpson's secretary, but I can't quite prove it. In any event, Edwina is the mother of director Paul Thomas Anderson of Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and much, much more. And she was married for a time to legendary announcer Ernie Anderson, the voice of the ABC television network.
There's drama, action, and romance. Fonzie Loves Pinky right after Happy Days.
Ernie and Edwina appeared together as newscasters in a 1976 movie called Tunnel Vision.
And now, direct from the Northeast Megapolis, Wake Up America.
Good morning. I'm Melanie Edwards, and welcome to Wake Up America. It's June 1st, 1985, and here's this morning's headlines.
Did you have any characters named Jacqueline in your version of the episode?
I did not. I have roughly as much idea of what's going on as you do, but hey, it's always nice to talk about lesser-known actors. actresses.
She had a pretty interesting life. And of course, she's the mother of a big movie director, but I couldn't find her anywhere in this episode other than Secretary, who's in the background. As for songs this week, we have Yakety Yak by the Coasters. Raunchy is performed by Richie's Band. This is a song that they keep practicing throughout the episode. It was a big hit in 1957 for Bill Justice. It was also the song that George Harrison played when he auditioned to be in the Quarrymen with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. We hear All I Have to Do Is Dream by the Everly Brothers. And finally, we get Stars and Stripes Forever, composed by John Philip Sousa and performed here by Donnie Most, Anson Williams, and Ron Howard.
They will be playing Stars and Stripes Forever. Hopefully not forever.
As for cultural and historical references, plastic garbage bags were invented in the 1950s, but they did not really become commonplace in American homes until the 60s. Before then, people put their garbage in paper bags like you see here. And for years, Tom Bosley was the spokesman for Glad trash bags.
Glad has come up with a way to really handle kitchen garbage. With these tall kitchen garbage bags with handles built right in.
The Glad Products Company was founded in 1963 in Oakland, California, and there's actually a Glad Trash Bags movie in the 80s with Tom Bosley in it. If you're looking for that, it's called $1 Million Mystery.
There's 4 million hidden in 4 different places. 1 million in each place.
Trash compactors were already invented in 1941 by M.S. Wells. Back then they were meant to crush oil cans, but the home version didn't come along really until the 1970s when John Boyd invented a hydraulic pressure system to compress household garbage. These units became somewhat popular in the 80s, but they never really caught on because of the price, the smell, the amount of space they take up, and other practical concerns. So the world was never really ready for the garbage gulper. Have you ever been in a house where they actually had a trash compactor in the house?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think they really caught on ever. So sorry, Howard. Orville and Wilbur Wright were two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, born in the years following the Civil War.
Wilbur and Orville were two brothers named Wright, the nicest pair of kids you've ever seen. They worked 12 years on a secret project. They thought it was a washing machine.
In 1892, they opened a store where they sold and repaired bicycles, and it's true that their work with bicycles influenced their aeronautic experiments, some of which were conducted right there in the store. Ultimately, these efforts paid off with the invention of the 3-axis control system, which is still used in aviation today. See-through clothing goes back at least as far as the 1770s, well before the time of Jenny Piccolo. Such clothing has had bouts of popularity ever since, usually inspiring controversy among politicians and public moralists. There's been a surprising amount of moral furor over see-through clothing over the years.
When you wear old dresses, the sun comes shining through.
Marion refers to a man named Frederick in Hollywood. She's referring to Frederick Mellinger, a lingerie designer who invented the push-up bra. While Mellinger served in the Army during World War II, he dreamed of women in silk and satin nighties, but he found that these items were scarce to non-existent when he got back home to America. In response, he started designing his own line of women's underwear, selling these items first through mail order in 1947, then opening his first Fredericks of Hollywood retail store in 1952.
One can see a lot of strange and interesting things while walking down Hollywood Boulevard, but somewhere between Jack Palance on one side and Will Rogers on the other stands the infamous Fredericks of Hollywood. Now, Frederick Mellinger, or Mr. Frederick, is said to have revolutionized underwear and become the prime minister of panties. He's designed dainties to lift you up, pull you in, and help you swing.
The chain then went national with stores across America. But unfortunately, in the last few years, it was put out of business by the internet, as so much has. The Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company has been promoting its products with a blimp since 1925. The company now has a fleet of blimps, though since 2014, some of these airships have had a rigid internal frame, meaning that they're not technically blimps. It looks like these vehicles have only had blinking or animated messages since the 1960s.
Wait, so if they're not technically blimps, what are they?
They are airships or dirigibles.
Oh, wow.
So it's a scandal. Some of the Goodyear blimps are not actually blimps. Blimpgate, we'll call it. Ralph randomly yells, "Bo Diddley!" at one point in the episode.
Bo Diddley!
Elias McDaniel, a.k.a. Bo Diddley, was one of the early pioneers of rock and roll and a huge influence on a generation of musicians. Bo Diddley is also the name of his signature composition and theme song. I studied some vintage footage to see if Bo was prone to lots of jumping around on stage back in the 50s. He sways a little bit to the beat, but he doesn't hop around like Ralph does, certainly.
Well,
and again,
why does Ralph Malph do anything?
Alexander Graham Bell is an inventor originally from Scotland who is credited with creating the first practical working telephone.
Alexander Graham Bell was building a fence with some wood and a long piece of wire. He said, "There's something strange going on around here. I keep hearing the voice of Uncle Meyer."
Bell was accused of stealing the idea from Ohio inventor Elisha Gray, though this was struck down in the courts. Bell's first telephone transmission occurred in 1876, and it was to his assistant Thomas A. Watson. Bell was also a proponent of eugenics and mandatory sterilization.
Well, that's cheerful.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Oh, yeah. He was a real prince.
Well, speaking of real great guys, we have Thomas Alva Edison up next. Edison is widely credited with inventing the light bulb, among many other things. It's more accurate to say that Edison's team developed the first practical incandescent light bulb. Perhaps Edison's greatest invention was his own legend. His reputation is mired in controversy to this day.
What's that thing you're working on?
Well, it's a light bulb and...
Light bulb. Yeah, I invented that. Me, I'm Thomas Edison. I invented the light bulb. What's it do?
It lights up a room using electrical...
Lights up a room using electrical stuff. I was about to say that because I invented it. I'm Thomas Edison. I rule.
Look it up. Edison was a dick.
Guglielmo Marconi is an Italian inventor usually credited as the father of radio due to his innovations in long-distance wireless audio transmission. These accomplishments led to him being name-checked in We Built This City on Rock and Roll by Starship. Rakes go back about 1,000 years, and the modern garden rake was invented in 1874, so I'm not sure why there would have been a 20-minute promotional film about them in Howard's lifetime.
They're very useful. Maybe there should be a 20-minute promotional film about them, just so that we can all take a moment to appreciate rakes and everything they do for us.
Rakes, my old arch enemy.
My find of the episode was the office building that they go to sell the garbage gulper. That office building is located at 1136 West 6th Street in Los Angeles. It's currently the home to an apartment complex called the Mint. One of the pieces of garbage Potsy is holding is an egg carton from Lucerne Foods, which is a big manufacturer of dairy products. That looks to be a 1970s version of the logo. Again, yes, somebody brought back an egg carton from the 70s. Howard and Fonz were paid about $2,700 in today's money for their hydraulic system, so not bad. Was Howard planning to keep all the money himself, by the way?
That seems to be the implication. If he is, that's a massive dick move. Howard, Fonzie's the entire reason your hydraulic system worked. It was his idea. Give him a cut, you dick!
Absolutely. That was, I thought, one of the strangest things in the episode. Other observations. I'm not sure why there's a scene at the beginning showing Fonz at Arnold's struggling to start his motorcycle. Is this to foreshadow his problems with the garbage gulper? What's up with that first scene?
It's either foreshadowing, like you said, or they just needed to pad the episode out.
Your second thing was, my guess, was that the episode ran a little bit shortened, so they just had some B-roll footage of Henry Winkler in the Arnold's parking lot, and they said, oh, just put that at the beginning. There are a lot of amundos this week. Fonz says greetamundo.
Hey, greetamundo!
And then Howard says exactamundo. And now we're starting to get the rules of amundos, because when Howard says it, Fonz takes a little bit of offense that Howard is using his amundos. Is Fonz the only one who's allowed to say amundo?
Probably, yeah.
Howard is great with his hands, according to Marion. More evidence of their active and varied sex life. As for those background extras that I'm increasingly obsessed with, we get a summit meeting between Walter Von Heen and Mickey Wheatley this week, and it looks like Mickey has joined the Gems. They get a great scene where they're right up in front, right in front of the cameras. It's wonderful. We also get another reference to Clarence, the cook at Arnold's this week. And I know there will be an on-screen Clarence, like in season 10 or 11, but we haven't seen him yet. I think in a contemporary sitcom, we would get at least one cutaway to Joni in welding school.
Is she in welding school yet, or is she just going to go to welding school soon?
I assume that when she calls at Arnold's that she is in welding school, and that she's calling from welding school.
Oh, wow. I just assumed she was at home.
This brings up the next issue. Aaron Moran disappears about 2/3 of the way through this episode, which would not be so noticeable if they didn't keep mentioning it.
This is my son. I have a daughter also.
Well, I'm sorry your daughter couldn't make it. They could use a soprano.
For the record, the Joni in welding school runner was my favorite joke of the episode, just because it is very, very funny.
Is it possible that the garbage gulper simply failed because they overloaded it with too much garbage at once? I mean, paper shredders work, but you can't shred a phone book at one time. It didn't seem fair to me that the garbage gulper was considered a failure because it couldn't gulp all that garbage. I hate that phrase, by the way. I hate having to say it. It sounds like something filthy, gulping someone's garbage.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think you're right that the garbage gulper would have worked if they hadn't shown too much hubris. They were like Icarus, flying too close to the sun.
Stop, or the wax will melt.
Do you think Mr. Simpson actually walks around with that walking stick? If so, that is a huge affectation.
It it's kind of weird because, like you said, he seems like a very non-humorous stuffed shirt type. So for him to, like, walk around with a fancy silver-tipped walking stick seems a little incongruous with what we know of him. Like, the rich guy who bought Fonzie's garage, it would make sense for him, but not Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, that seemed like a very odd prop to use. I always associate those fancy walking sticks with Kingpin from Daredevil.
The Kingpin always holds the trump card.
This is a small thing, but that old-timey border around the photo is a really nice touch, because it made it look like, oh yeah, they put it in the photo album, and I thought that was kind of nice. And Fonzie doesn't get depressed.
You know, Fonzie, you're amazing. You never get depressed.
What about Fonzie the salesman?
Yeah, that's some real bullshit. Come on, Howard, you were there. You gave him that speech. What?
Exactly. Like, he not only gets depressed, he, like, went into a real funk and completely fell apart when he lost his job as a mechanic. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
It was. It was a real romp, and it was nice seeing Fonzie and Howard bond, and you really do get the sense that they really like and respect one another, even if Richie kind of has to push Fonzie into helping Howard.
I thought that the nicest aspect of this episode was that it was a Howard-Fonzie team-up, which we don't get that often. I guess Two Angry Men, which is kind of a Fonz-How team-up episode, although they're obviously on opposite sides of a conflict.
I mean, it's a team-up in the sense that the first two-thirds of Batman v Superman is a team-up.
This time, though, they're actually on the same side, and I thought that was kind of amusing. Of all things, it reminded me of the episodes of Family Matters that teamed up Carl and Urkel.
Thanks, Carl, for lending me these boxers.
You're welcome.
They sure are roomy. I could hold a 3-ring circus in here.
Although, in that comparison, I guess Fonzie becomes the Urkel of the show, which he kind of is. He is kind of the Urkel of Happy
100%. I mean, you probably hate that comparison, but it's apt.
My only disappointment with this episode was that when I saw the title, I thought it was going to be about Fonzie starting his own business where he teaches other people how to be like him.
Oh my God.
Like how to be cool, how to fix motorcycles, how to pick up girls. And it's always because people are asking him, Fonz, how do I do this? Fonz, how do I do that? So he started Fonz-How Inc. to show people how to be like the Fonz. But that's not what the episode is at all. As it turns out, I think this episode was actually kind of nice. I don't think that this will be one that I remember for a long time. In fact, I had kind of forgotten a lot of it until you started reading the summary of the episode, but it's perfectly pleasant.
It's kind of like cotton candy. It's not very filling, but it's enjoyable enough.
I would say this is a classic back half of the season episode. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel here. Yeah. Let's just have some goofy fun with our characters.
Yeah. Season 4 really should have ended with the graduation 2-parter.
I think what happened is that Graduation Parts 1 and 2 was meant to end the season, and then they moved it up, maybe for sweeps or something. And I think the season really was supposed to end with Graduations Parts 1 and 2.
The same thing is going to happen with the Passages 2-parter at the very end of the show. So
they had their series finale, and then they went on for a few more months with more episodes. And so the show actually ends with Fonzie's Spots. And that episode has a real emotional breakthrough for Howard and Fonzie.
Mr. C, I love you.
And so I thought, how appropriate that the show ends with a Howard-Fonzie team-up episode. So we eventually get back around to that. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Sphericals. That's SFERICALS.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can send us questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Fonzie gets a dog in Spunky Come Home.
Oh my gosh, I can hardly wait. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.